Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam, and on behalf of Book Soup, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for tonight's event with Mark Oshiro and Anna Marie McLemore, moderated by Christina Orlando, here to discuss That Way Madness Lies, 15 of Shakespeare's most notable works reimagined. Yay. In That Way Madness Lies, 15 acclaimed YA writers put their modern spin on William Shakespeare's celebrated classics. Between West Side Story, 10 Things I Hate About You, Kiss Me Kate, contemporary audiences have always craved reimaginings of Shakespeare's most beloved works, and now some of today's best writers for teens take on the bard in these 15 whip-smart and original retellings, edited by Dahlia Adler and published with Flatiron Books. Today is also International Transgender Day of Visibility, which, if you are unfamiliar, is an annual event dedicated to celebrating transgender people and raising awareness of discrimination faced by transgender people worldwide, as well as a celebration of their contributions to society. Book Soup is proud to employ many members of the LGBTQIA community, myself included, and is proudly located in historically queer West Hollywood. So we're very honored, especially honored to have this special event on this special day, and encourage everyone to do their part as members and or allies, especially with so many resources now very readily available on our Instagrams almost every day, which is amazing. So we'll be hosting more virtual events in the near future, and you can learn more about them on our website by signing up for our email newsletter, as well as following us on social media at Book Soup. And you can also follow our Crowdcast page right here. Our next event is tomorrow, same time, 6 p.m. PST, with Donnie Walton and Taylor Jenkins Reid, here to discuss Donnie's debut novel, The Final Revival of Opal and Nev. And you can also find past events on our YouTube channel. So tonight's event will end with a Q&A, and to submit a question, please use the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. And if you see a question on the list that you'd like for our speakers to answer, you can click the like button below or next to each question, and we'll try to answer as many as time will allow. And please also feel free to engage with each other and our authors in the chat area. Also, please support Book Soup and our authors by purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book, which you can do by clicking the green button also below the viewer screen. And the link will take you to our website where you can finish the checkout process, and that won't interrupt the viewing, so you can do that at any time. If you'd like to come buy a book in person and are local, we are open for in-store browsing now. So you can come by every day from 11 to 5, and you can bring your pups and hang out. And we are doing limited capacity and with masks. So, of course. And with all that said, thank you for standing my long intro. I'm now going to introduce our guests for this evening, starting with our featured authors. Mark Oshiro is the award-winning author of Anger is a Gift, winner of the 2019 Schneider Family Book Award, and Each of Us a Desert, both with Tortine. Their middle grade debut, The Insiders, is out in September 2021. When not writing, they run the online Mark Does Stuff universe and are trying to pet every dog in the world. So next time you come to Book Soup, all the dogs are always at Book Soup. And even though they're not here with us, I am going to read Cory and AR's bio just to shout them out because they're part of the anthology and we wish they were here. Cory McCarthy, they, he, and AR Capetta, all pronouns, are acclaimed best-selling authors of many books for young people, including the co-authored Once and Future and its sequel, Sword in the Stars. They met while earning MFAs at Vermont College of Fine Arts and soon after fell in love. And we wish they were here. And our other author tonight who is with us, Anna Marie McLemore, they, them, is the queer Latinx non-binary author of The Weight of Feathers, a William C. Morris Debut Award finalist. I love that you have your books next to you. Stonewall Honor Book, When the Moon Was Ours, Wild Beauty, a Kirkus, SLJ, and Booklist Best Book of 2017. And Blanca and Roja, one of Time Magazine's 100 Best Fantasy Novels of All Time. Congrats, that's amazing. Dark and Deepest Red, a Winter 2020 Indie Next List title, and The Mirror Season. I was waiting for that. And our moderator tonight, Christina Orlando, they, them, is the books editor and publicity coordinator for Tor.com, where they get to be a book nerd all day. As a freelance writer covering poetry, gender, and sexuality, their work has appeared in Electric Literature, Catapult, Gal Dem, Them, Adroit Journal, and Book Riot. They're a 2019 recipient of Spotify's Stand Up Grant for People of Color in Podcasting and currently reside in Brooklyn, New York. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We're so excited to have you. I'm going to leave the screen to you now. And everyone, please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to talk to Mark and AM today to celebrate That Way Men List Lives, this beautiful book, which I'm now realizing is showing up backwards, I think. Whatever. You guys
already got upside down, so we might as well.
Right.
I'm amazed that you guys had your books just ready to go like that.
I've learned. I've been doing so many events. I literally just keep a stack next to me at all times so that I remember that I have the visual there.
I was looking and I was like, do I have any of yours nearby me? I'm in the middle of packing, so all my books are all over the place, and I kind of wish I was fast enough to have done that. But I'm so excited to talk to you guys here again, and happy Trans Day of Visibility. I'm so excited that you guys are visible today, because otherwise I would normally assume that you were invisible. And we wouldn't be able to do this. Obviously, that's what that means.
I wore the flower crown you could see from space. Specifically for that reason.
It's wonderful. It's so good. So I want to start off by asking you both, what is your favorite Shakespeare adaptation? There's been so many, and I'm wondering what your favorite is.
Okay.
Really hard. Yeah, Mark, please go first.
I feel like the best answer for I just feel like we have to get out of the way that 10 Things I Hate About You is perfect from beginning to end. Like, it's just perfect. I love it so much. My personal favorite is Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. I like adaptations that are both deeply understand material, but then also deeply feral. It's kind of like where I like my adaptations, like something where you're watching it and you're like, what is going on in your head? How do you think of this? But yet it's so deeply respectful in that way where you can tell someone loves the source material. We did one of these events earlier, and I still maintain that I think the best Mercutio and Benvolio are in Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. I love them. I love what those actors do with those characters. I love the way that it's both modern and it still feels epic and old in that interesting way. So that's my personal favorite.
I'm with you.
I'm going to go with another contributor from this anthology, Lily Anderson's The Only Thing Worse Than Me Is You, Much Ado About Nothing, Reimagining. I just love how she weaves in all the threads of the original in a contemporary setting where it's kind of, some of the elements you're like, oh yeah, I noticed that. And then some of them are more subtle where you're like, oh, I just caught that. Like some of them on a reread, I caught them. And I love that kind of connection, sort of like Mark was talking about with the source material, where you can feel the love for it.
That's awesome. I'm going to have more questions about adaptations for you guys later. I have an either or, and you have to make choices. Because
we're getting spicy. I love it.
I decided to be mean. So we're talking about Trans Day of Visibility. We're talking about queer retellings, especially with the both of you in this particular anthology. And on tour.com, I, for a while, was running a series called This Book Queered Me, where authors would write essays about the books that influenced them when they were younger or were foundational to their sexuality or got them that like aha moment. And I realized over the course of editing those stories, for people of color, that doesn't happen so often, and we don't have books that happened in our youth or in our foundational years where we felt represented. And so it's kind of a different experience, and it is very tough for people who are growing up. So I'm wondering, when was the first time you felt represented truly on the page? And it's okay if that hasn't happened at all. And how do you feel knowing that your stories might be that representation for someone who's growing up?
Just have to like dig the knife in the second half of the question.
Yeah, dude.
I'm gonna answer this question slightly subversively, which is because the page is technically a script. You're right. I didn't have anything as a kid where there was a queer Latinx character or a non-binary Latinx character at all. Nothing, zero, not a single one. I felt sort of a kinship and a representation when I read Bless Me Ultima and House on Mango Street my freshman year of high school. Those are the first two books in which a Latinx character, period, was at the center of a narrative at all. And so I'm very thankful for that English teacher, but I was very lucky in that there was a television show where there was a queer Latinx character, and it was My So-Called Life. And Ricky from My So-Called Life, despite how even now I've rewatched the show so many times over the years, it is a very stereotypical story, and it falls into this whole trope that, like, you know, brown and black families are inherently much more homophobic than white ones, and it is absolutely a queer person's story defined by tragedy and chaos and the struggle, and yet being a young queer kid who was in the closet, and yet I don't know if either of you have experienced this, but it's so interesting thinking back on the bullying and the homophobic bullying, because I'm of this mind now where I'm like, it was horrible, it was terrible, it was cruel, but also you were right, I am gay, like you knew it, like all these kids knew. They could see my mannerisms, like the way, you know, I've always been expressive with my hands. I'm very flamboyant. I talk, there's just a way I talk where anywhere I go, everyone just sort of assumes I'm gay. I've never really been able to like hide that part of me, even though I was in the closet. And so I think about that story, and the thing that struck me the most was ultimately, I feel like Ricky got to be himself. And I think, like, God, what would it have been if we had gotten to season 2 or season 3? Where would his story have gone? But for me, that was like super formative, was getting to see a brown queer character come into themselves and find friendship and love with other people. And also having had a very difficult childhood, like there is something beautiful about getting to see someone else struggle and then make it. So that's my answer. Though I'll make it slightly, I'm going to pass it to you, Anna-Marie, by also making it slightly awkward, which is that I do feel very represented by your work. In particular, Blanca y Roja. As someone who's been through trauma, who is a survivor, I find that your work, I love how specific it is, if that makes sense. It's so specific. And I know we talk a lot about like what's a universal, like, you know, universal storytelling that everyone must relate to. But I kind of like that your stories, I feel like there's only this very small group of people who might be able to relate to a certain plot line. And I really like that about it. So, you know, I love you. You're great.
Oh, igualmente. I love your work for that kind of same reason. It's the shared landscape, which starts to feel like a little bit of the pun when you're starting to think of each of us a desert. But that's really it. It's like the shared landscapes where you know that you're going to be understood, whether that story is exactly yours or not. And I think that's so much of what I was hoping for and reaching for growing up. And I had to really look to find it. And I had to rely on people who were willing to hand me those books, like when they were available, to be able to find them. I'm thinking of like, so often I think of like Water for Chocolate, which is not as queer as I wish it was, but that was a big book for me. I think of Passing by Nella Larson, which is both a window book and a mirror book, because it's not the same experience as mine, but there was a lot about it that made me feel seen. I also saw a lot of queerness in that book. I don't know if it was totally there or if it's not. It's up for debate. But that's a classic I wish was read so much more often. So I was looking out for that kind of queerness, even when I still kind of frankly hated it in myself, just because I learned to. And I think unfortunately a lot of us learn to. And at the same time having this feeling like there was something wrong with me because I knew that my gender was more complicated than I was sort of told that it was supposed to be. So a lot of feelings today on Trans Day of Visibility, but a lot of gratitude too, that I'm able to be out, that I know people like the people I'm gathered with right now. It's just something I'm tremendously grateful for, and something I couldn't have imagined growing up.
But I mean, I think it's interesting too, because you know, you and I, you know, AR, I think about the work that Kason Callender's doing. I think about the work that Mason Deaver's doing. I think for so many of us, like I know I would have realized what I was struggling with in terms of my gender and thinking, you know, and we talked about this before, but, you know, I spent so long thinking that what I was dealing with was that I was just not good at being a gay man. When really it was, you're just not a man. That's the problem. Like, you're trying to approach this, but how can you approach something if you don't have the language and until you have the words and the terms? And so, you know, like, I suppose that is how I'm thinking about the answer to the second question that Christina posed is, you know, my work, you know, pretty universally centers queer people of color and queer trans people of color and the intersection of the two of them. And the reason is because I don't want people to go through what we went through, that not knowing and struggling with that sense of like, there's something here and what am I missing? What is the thing that will make me feel whole or make me feel myself or make me feel like I'm telling the truth about myself? And so, you know, I do think about that as I'm creating stories, is what are the possibilities that I can put into a work that might make someone else feel like that life can be possible for them. I'm curious, do you think about those sort of things too? Like, I always do. I think being queer people of color, we kind of have to think about like, we haven't been here celebrated in the canon in the way that other writers have. So I'm just going to aggressively be myself all the time.
I think about it a lot, and it's both responsibility and it's a joy to be able to tell stories that I would have thought I thought we weren't allowed to tell. I thought we weren't allowed to live those stories growing up. And it's humbling, especially like you know this about me, like how many trans and non-binary main characters I wrote before I was like, oh yeah, like you were
maybe there's a reason I'm doing this.
I don't like it's kind of amazing, like the powers of denial. Like I was pretty much a guy for part of high school, like made effort and then was like, oh no, like that was, I don't know what that was. And then just ignored it for a while and wrote these books. And so I would get, and I still get messages from readers that are overwhelming about like, this book helped me figure out something about myself, whether it's queer identity or trans identity or non-binary identity. And I'm so like, I can barely talk about that. Like I get overwhelmed by hearing that. And I'm so grateful to have some small like part of someone's journey like that. And to be able to, and to be able to tell like readers, like, it's okay if you're figuring yourself out. Like clearly I was writing about this and still hadn't figured it out. Like it's really okay. We're all kind of works in progress, and it takes us a while, and that's all right. And it changes sometimes. How we identify changes, and all of that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you both for sharing that and being vulnerable. And I was thinking about this as you were talking. I didn't figure out that I was non-binary until I was later. I had feelings. I can look back on my life and say, oh, like I should have known when I was 12. But I didn't have the language for it. And now there being more trans and non-binary creators out there, and you know, the cultural conversation has shifted, I get jealous of young people who have figured it out quicker a little bit. And that's why TikTok is really difficult. But it's I just like get really mad about it. But it's really a beautiful thing, and a lot of responsibility, I think, to take up that mantle when you're writing for young people. But, you know, everyone, we're so grateful to you both for sharing your stories. I promise we will move on from feelings a little bit. We'll get that.
It's just an hour of feelings the whole time.
I mean, we could. I got time.
Yeah.
That's what our therapists are for. So shifting focus a little bit, so much of our cultural conversations about Shakespeare are about timelessness, about how, you know, we think of him maybe as a stuffy old white man, but stories transcend time, the themes transcend time, the characters are still so relatable. And I think when we add queerness and transness to those narratives, sometimes it can feel like it's a modernization, even though queer stories are also very timeless and have been on for ages. And I'm wondering, as writers, do you think about creating stories that are timeless, or do you think more about speaking to your contemporary audience? And how do you deal with sort of the juxtaposition of wanting to tell stories that are, I don't know if like relatable is the right word, but that are universal maybe a little bit more, or saying like, I know who my reader is, and be like yourself or whatever that is.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of related to when me and Anna Marie were talking earlier about this notion of specificity too. I think back on like when I was trying to get an agent for Anger is a Gift, and then when Anger is a Gift went on submission, and so much of what I heard from people in the industry was this notion of like, I don't know how to sell this book. I don't know how to get normal people. I literally got a rejection was I don't know how to sell this to normal people, which like, oh boy, that's your job. Like, I don't need to tell you how to do that. Like, that's your job as an editor. I don't understand. And so you have this idea of where you're writing into this whole system. Like, you're writing into a system in which there are people who literally don't think you exist, and when they are presented with your existence, their immediate thought is, well, I can't, why would I cater to you? Why would I do anything that supports you and your life or whatnot? And I feel very lucky in that my agent, and I mean, this is a huge reason why I signed with my agent. My agent was never like, make this book less specific, make it more relatable. In fact, that was the reason they were so interested in it, is this tells a very specific story, and it tells a story that other people do. And I mean, that is the weird thing, and I'm sure you get this too, AM, is sometimes you write and people come back to you with like, I saw this whole narrative in the book and I felt so seen by it. And you're sitting there like, I didn't plan any of it. What are you talking about? How did you see that in there? But that's the beauty of fiction, is that people can pull these narratives because you bring yourself to every book. You bring your experiences, your life to a book. So I don't worry about something being like universally relatable. Instead, I certainly have an audience in mind with every story that I write. But what instead is, I think of it, is it compelling? Is this a story that is interesting enough that someone might connect with it, even if they have nothing to do with it? Because while I certainly have a specific audience with Anger is a Gift, I would say even with this, with Shipwrecked, the story, you know, I'm thinking of all, I love that you brought up the TikTok thing, because this is what I was thinking when I started writing Shipwrecked, was we are now in a world in which people can go to prom with the person they want. And that is literally, I'm 37, no, you couldn't. There were no queer couples at all 4 years I was in high school, not at a single prom that I can remember. There might have been, but they might have been, hiding themselves in plain sight. But, that wasn't a thing. And so I'm writing in a way where that is never a conflict. With Shipwrecked, I was like, this is a shipwreck-themed dance at a high school. There's no sense of, it's weird that these people are together at the dance. Instead, I am imagining a contemporary world where that isn't the issue. The issue is, does this person even know that I like them? I secretly have a huge crush on them and want to be with them forever. Or, people navigating desire and consent and mistaken identity, all very actually timeless things that we've been dealing with for a long time. How do you make that fit into a 5,000 word story? So yeah, so that's sort of what I was thinking of with Shipwreck specifically.
Great. So this was an interesting story for me to write, because it is kind of in similar language as Midsummer Night's Dream. So in a way, it probably like sounds the oldest of anything that I've ever written. And part of why I wanted to do that is to sort of give this character that, and the treatment of this character always bothered me in Midsummer Night's Dream, to give this character a chance to have the have the rest of their story. And also, I just wanted to bring like the way that we acknowledge and celebrate and love queer and trans identity and brown queer and trans identity. I wanted to bring that into that time period, which is probably going to seem like an anachronism to some readers, but mostly what I've heard is love for the fact that like we were there, like as has been said before, like we've kind of been there, which is something that like was easy for me to know growing up about being of color, about being brown, about being mixed race. That was easy for me to know. It was just logic. Like, yes, we have always been here. People of color have always been here throughout history. I did not necessarily think that about queer people. Like it just wasn't. I thought queerness was invented at some point, which sounds ridiculous, but when you grow up not seeing it or not knowing that you are seeing it, not knowing that it is there, not knowing that how you feel is an option, it's something that like you just don't take as being part of history as much as I did about being Latinx. So I loved doing that, even though it's way different from what I've normally done. Like I'm often kind of writing in this like sparkly fairy world that's kind of like not in a specific time period is what I've kind of been told, and I'm like, yeah, that's fair. But with this, I wanted to have it have kind of a Shakespeare feel and be like, yes, we are going to be putting brown trans fairies into Midsummer Night's Dream.
For sure. And on that subject, I mean, your story is such a love letter to brownness and brown skin. And we talked about this a little bit before, but it's so touching for me, and I'm sure many other readers, because I grew up hating how brown I was. I'm sure a lot of people have had that similar experience. And I think a lot of times when we see brownness in stories, it's viewed as exotic. And I know I've certainly been told that I look exotic plenty of times. It's just super cool. But I was wondering, when you were thinking about what you wanted to write, what was important for you to get across? You know, what was the impulse behind that? And, you know, what felt important to you about giving love to brownness?
So I started with all the parts of Midsummer Night's Dream that I love, like all the fairiness, all the enchanted woods and all that. But I also started the part that I really hated, which is like this child who's called like the changeling child being like passed between the fairy king and fairy queen like a prop, and they're basically like they're fighting over this child in a way that's like you don't have any like, yeah, it so many feelings. And I wanted this character who just got treated as a plot device, I wanted this character to be celebrated and to be the center of the story. And so much of what I love doing and what I end up doing, whether I mean to or not, in the books I write, is just celebrating the color brown, literally and figuratively. Like it's one of my beauty colors, like my colors that like shows up even when I'm not thinking about it, as like beauty and safety and like all of that just shows up. And I think it's just something that comes up in the stories that I write. But here it ended up being like really literal. Like it is the color of these characters, like finding affirmation in these fairy woods that have kind of been like ruled by white fairies for as long as they've known. And then they're not.
Yeah, I was thinking sort of the same thing too in choosing the four main characters, because there's just, you know, and you talked about this before in a different panel too, but like when doing an adaptation, especially since we're all doing short stories, you kind of have to pick the thing to focus on. You can do. There are actually some people in this anthology who managed to put almost everything in. I was like, I can't do that because 12th Night has 7,000 plots. So what's the thing I'm going to focus on? And for me, it was, I wanted to fit the shipwreck in. I needed mistaken identity. And I think for me, what the humor of 12th Night, what's so funny about it is a trope we still are dealing with that is key to romantic comedy. Could you all just sit down and talk to each other? Could you just do that for like 5 minutes? Just sit in a room and talk to each other. So I knew miscommunication had to be a big thing. But I think the beauty of getting to the point where we are as creators and not feeling that sort of terror of, is anyone going to relate to this? Oh, does anyone care that all my characters are brown? I'm just like, they all are. Who cares? So I've got the Rojas twins. I got Antonio, as well as Olivia, and getting to just basically make all of these cast of characters black or brown is just, that's just my take on it. That's just the world. That's just who they are. And, if you relate to it, great. I don't, my take is just, I'm creating what I want to see. And what I wanted to see when I was a kid was characters who look like me and my community getting to be in romantic comedies. Like I've talked about how this story, like the stakes are so low, and I really liked writing where it wasn't this high stress adventure. It's a dance. It's a school dance, which, by the way, at that age was terrifying. So there is that in there, because school dances were social nightmares. And so, but like, how do you find the joy in that? And what is the joy in brown and black people loving one another?
I appreciate you providing a lovely segue into my next question. Ooh. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Because I was going to ask you about school dances and proms and things like that. When I was studying Shakespeare, I was told that the dramas end in death, the comedies end in marriage and a dance. Mm-hmm. And so I was so excited to see the dance be the centerpiece for your story.
Yeah.
But in my experience, and I think probably in a lot of people's experience, that's where all the drama happens. The
yes.
dance is not happy-go-lucky. Like, it just is horrible.
I mean, mine too. And it's so interesting because I also learned the same thing of what happens in the comedies, what happens in the tragedies. And so the dance was like, as soon as I was like, oh, it has to be a dance. Like, it just wasn't even, I just knew, okay, it's at a dance, the end, because it's a comedy. There's got to be, I mean, I wasn't going to do marriage. Like, I just thought, like, why marriage? Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think that's going to work. So I was like, dance, it's got to be a dance.
For sure. What do you think it is about dances and parties and things like that, and proms in particular, probably, that lends itself to high drama situation?
Wow. Well, one of the things I specifically played off is just literally, it's darker. And so mistaken identities can happen a lot easier. And when you have twins at a dance where it's dark, and one of them is dressing in a suit for the first time because this is how they feel comfortable with their presentation, I was like, that is right there. That's it. That's the miscommunication. I think you also have this sort of like artificial hierarchy. And I think you have a different hierarchy in Shakespeare as well, as you can see him representing certain groups, certain castes within society at the time. And so I still kind of wanted to have that. And so you have this notion of like Olivia, who's the popular girl, who is president of the student body, and then V, they're actually just the secretary. And so they're not as well known. People don't really pay attention to them. And then you have, the two boys in particular. And I think one of the things that was fun about playing with that dance scene is we're told that these dances growing up, especially here in America, are like the pinnacle of your teenage years. And that's drilled into you very, very young. You need to look forward to these dances. And so part of it was, I think of it like a power fantasy. What if I would have been able to go to these dances with a boy? What if I'd been able to go with, I mean, first of all, the people I had crushes on, like 90% of them ended up straight. So good job, Mark. Like, way to go. Like, from teenagers, I was a disaster. But, like, I think of like I went to prom with someone who a week after prom outed themselves as a huge homophobe. And I was just like, and then when I stopped talking to them the summer after I graduated, they were like, why did you stop talking to me? And I was like, do you remember that huge presentation you gave in class? Like, and they were like, oh, well, that was just a presentation. I was like, what? So like, I think like, a lot of what I'm doing in fiction, especially when I am veering away from like, I don't really want to write about trauma or the struggle, which I do write about. I do enjoy writing about that. I think with this story in particular, it was the fantasy. What would it have been like if I could have been my full self? And what would it have looked like if I could have ended up with the person I wanted to end up with? And so the drama shifts. I get to reimagine a story that is about love, that is about misconnections and mistaken identity. But the joke isn't cross-dressing. The joke isn't, oh, this person who is dressed as a man who falls for them, doesn't that mean they're gay or queer or bi? And instead, it's never really addressed. Well, this is, what if that's just who they are? And I loved getting to write that sincerely instead.
That's beautiful. And since you brought up the suit, I do want to talk a little bit about the suit, because I think that it's such an iconic sort of piece of clothing or, outfit for non-binary people. Especially a suit can be really difficult, can give you a lot of gender feelings, whether that be, euphoria or like horrible gender feelings. And so when V comes to the prom dressed in the suit for the first time, it's a bit of a moment. And I'm wondering, what do you think that suit means for them in particular? And what does it feel like to be able to talk about presentation and clothing and coming out in that way with gender presentation?
My relationship with clothing has been so complicated my whole life. Part of it growing up poor is just not being able to have the things that I think look nice. And, a good portion of the bullying that I got was people could tell I was poor, and people could tell that I was wearing clothes that didn't fit because I was growing and we couldn't afford to get new clothes. But in particular, any sort of formal wear, even from when I was a kid, just like set my anxiety to the moon. And I did not figure it out for 34 years, 35 years. I could not. I was like, I should feel great. This is what I'm supposed to wear. I'm supposed to wear a suit if you're being fancy. And I would get in it and I would start sweating and I would be just miserable and uncomfortable the whole time. And so what V's transformation and what is so important about their journey is them stepping out in the suit was sort of what it's slightly autobiographical. I got to attend. I was very lucky. Anger is a Gift got nominated for a Lammy Award in the Young Adult category, and that the Lambda Awards, you don't F around. You don't. Like, everyone comes, and so I was like, you have to dress fancy, and I was experiencing so much anxiety about it, and thankfully had a very good friend who not only went shopping with me, but as we were shopping was like, what things look good, what things make you feel good. Let's try to like interrogate what it is that's causing you so much anxiety about this. And a lot of it was, if I wear a suit, I think everyone's going to perceive me as a man and just assume that that's who I am. At that point, I knew I was non-binary. I was not fully out. I was out to friends or whatnot, but I was so terrified. But I was like, but I don't know that I want to go fully, completely on the opposite end of the spectrum either. I don't know where I fit. I was like, is there what's in the middle between like suit and a dress? Is there something in the middle? And so much of what it became was, I want this suit to be a performance. And so I still have it. I found the pinkest suit on the face of the planet. I mean, like as pink as the flowers in your crown and the pink stripe, like it is that pink. And I found like a set of like dress slacks that were like a darker pink. So it was like this neat little color combo. And then I did like lavenders for like the pocket and so what it was like, it wasn't that the suit was wrong. It was that I wasn't thinking of it as an extension of an expression of me. And so I wrote that into V. How is this an expression of who they are and who they want to be? And so you have that scene where they're like feeling the lapels and it's velvet and there's a texture to it, and that tactile element is really important because it's not just I get to appear how I want to appear, but it feels good both literally and metaphorically. And having that moment and then having people like do the double take, like wait, what's going on here? Like I know who you are. What is this? And I also love that too because that sense of like, I'm putting on a show and you're looking at me, and that element became very important. And I still think about that. Like I can't wait until I can like leave the house regularly. Cause I'm like, I plan outfits, but I'm like, I'll just wear them in my living room. But I'm like, my TV really loves this outfit. This is great. I can't wait. Like, and I'm really excited to explore that further and incorporate articles of clothing that I I was conditioned as a kid to think, oh, you can't wear this because of who you are. And now I'm like, oh, just wait. Just wait.
That's beautiful. I also am very excited for outfits. Very much looking forward to that. Am, I want to turn to you. Sort of on the subject of clothing and gender presentation, one of the things I really loved about your story was you did incorporate binding, which is such a fraught subject. And I think often when we see binding portrayed in media, it's a girl dressing like a guy to go be a knight or something like that. And it's someone like wrapping an ace bandage around themselves. And sometimes that can be really tough for people who are struggling with gender. And so I'm wondering sort of what was important for you about writing that? What did you want to get across, and how you felt about, you know, putting that element of the non-binary and trans experience on the page?
I write about binding a lot because it feels like power. Like it's like, oh, something is right now. Like what I'm thinking of that feeling like the first time I put on a binder. It's a little bit like what you were talking about with that suit, which I love the visual of, like the pink and the purple. It's just like that moment of something being set right. And it's not for everyone. Like if you don't, like if you're still non-binary, if you do not want to bind, like there's not a particular like dress code, which I think is something that like we find out through conversations, that like you do not have to be non-binary in a particular way. But like that feeling of it's like this, oh, that's how I'm supposed to feel in clothing. Which is part of why I love this conversation about clothing in general, because that moment where you're like, oh yeah, that's what people talk about when they talk about feeling really good about how they feel in clothing, how they look in clothing. And I also write about binding because like I would not know how to, like it's a little complicated, and I would not know what I need to know about it without my trans siblings, who were just like, okay, let's talk. Because like before I knew anything, like I was binding in ways that, like you talk about the ace bandage, like it's dangerous if you do it wrong, if no one tells you like how to do it, if no one like gives you tips on how to do it. Because let's talk about the fact that like binders like that are called binders that you order, they are expensive, and they are expensive. They can be hard to get. They can especially be hard to get if you're not like in a safe space, or to be able to buy them. And that's even if you can afford them, because they are expensive pieces of clothing. So I had like trans siblings being like, okay, let's talk about like what you can use that's not going to hurt you. And that goes back to the experience of just like found family, like queer and trans and non-binary found family. Like they're the ones who are going to be able to tell you things that they know because it was passed on to them, because they found it out. And this whole experience of sharing knowledge and just sharing like the love and giving space to the learning process. Mark, like how you were talking about with the shopping, like having someone go with you and help like make that space. So binding for me is about, it's about the character. And it's also about their community. It's about knowledge that someone else has shared with them, because you need that. Whatever you're wearing, or whatever your particular journey is going to look like we all need that. We all need that community. So yeah, that's a lot about why I end up writing about that, because I don't want to just write about the awful feelings, and they are there. Like they are there for me. They are there for a lot of us. I also want to write about that moment where it just feels like the world opens up a little, because it's about that one thing, but it's also about more than that one thing. Because you're like, there is a way for me to feel good. I'm feeling good about this one particular thing now, and that is important all on its own. And also it makes me think like, oh, there are other ways I can feel good in my gender, and I can feel good in who I am, and I can have that be affirmed.
That was very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you both for sharing your stories. I know that got a little personal, and talking about clothing and gender presentation can be very intimate. So I appreciate you guys sharing. We're going to move a little bit away from feelings now. Just a little bit. So I have a couple of sort of quicker questions for you. What other plays or films do you think would make a good YA adaptation or queer retelling, sort of outside of Shakespeare, but maybe, you know, classics that you wish you were seeing, or other plays or movies that are favorites? It's a big question. I maybe should have given you options. I want to see a YA adaptation of Waiting for Godot.
Oh, that's good. Oh,
It'd be nuts, but it's my favorite.
We should talk. That's really
We can do it.
Okay. I'm gonna throw a wild one out there. I want to see, because I think I feel like there's so many obvious ones, but I actually want to see ones where it's a source text that you're like, I don't understand how that would first of all ever be adapted, and how do you make it like queer trans. I think in particular, I want to see stories about us in like genres or tropes that we just never see. So my submission is I want to see, and maybe I'll have to write it, a YA queer adaptation of Die Hard.
I love you for that.
Like, I want the high action, extremely stressful thriller, but it's queer. Like what if the person, you know, what's his name, is saving? I literally, oh God, now I just had an idea. Oh boy.
Yeah.
No, I have 2 books due in the next 6 weeks. I cannot think about this too much. So I would love to do something like that.
By the time this panel's over.
Oh no, I hate it. I have a whole idea now. This is dark-sided. How dare you do this to me, Christina?
I'm not sorry.
You're not sorry. So that's my answer, first of all. Yeah, go ahead.
I also want to just request that you tweet out a picture of you in the pink suit after we're done.
Yeah, yes.
AM, do you have feelings about that? About other things that you'd like to see adapted?
Okay, so our editor is saying cough the Great Gatsby. AM. Yes, I will talk about
it.
I will talk about the next book. The next book I'm working on. I'm thrilled to have two books coming out next year. They are both very queer, very brown, and very trans. The first one's called Lake Lore in Winter. The second one is going to have an official title at some point. The title is The Gay Gatsby for right now, but we are probably going to have to change it. It will always be a little bit The Gay Gatsby in my heart. So yeah, I'm getting to reimagine The Great Gatsby for Fievel and Friends Remixed Classic Series, which I am so excited about, because when they asked me to do The Great Gatsby, I was like, you know how this is going to end up, right? Like, you know that Jay Gatsby's going to be trans. You know that it's going to be him and Nick. You know that, like, Daisy Buchanan is going to be, like, an angry lesbian Latina socialite. And they were like, yeah, we sort of knew what we were getting into when we asked you. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. And I am so excited about that, because, like, talk about a text that, like, I saw a lot of queerness in, like, when I was reading it. And I was like, is anyone else seeing this? Like, he's just like staring at him and like admiring his suit, like talking again about suits and like watching him get out of the pool. Is anyone else reading what I'm reading? So I'm so excited to make this story as like, it feels like a trans story to me. Like, it feels like that's there, and that's what a lot of people have told me. It also just felt like Nick and Gatsby was there the whole time.
For the record, we were all reading what you were reading. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I was actually, while you were talking, I thought, why didn't anyone do Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead for this baby? That would have been good too. So the other questions I have are, who is your favorite Shakespeare protagonist, and which character would you most like to play in either a stage adaptation or a film? I know you're both not actors, but, like, you know, in a dream life.
I mean, I have to out myself. I was an actor. I did theater for 3 years. My junior and senior year of high school and my freshman year of college. with only slight success, which is that I was the lead in the spring musical my senior year.
Oh.
No, because it was the music band. It was not the straightest role on the face of the planet.
I love that so much.
Yeah, I cannot even hear the word trombone without being immediately triggered. I can't. Oh, I can't. I remember they did that like revival where Matthew Broderick was Harold Hill. And my friends are like, we're all going to watch it because it's like an open secret. Like people will, in my life, we'll just be hanging out or like we'll be on the phone or on a video thing and someone will start singing 76 trombones or treble. And I'm like, I'm going to murder you the next time I see you. And so I remember I watched the adaptation. I think my soul left my body in the first half hour. I don't remember any of it. I can't even, so I will say, to actually answer your question, my favorite character might be. I'm real partial. It's weird because the thing I'm actually most familiar with, despite that I've actually read Twelfth Night the most, the thing I'm most familiar with is Romeo and Juliet. And I really do like Benvolio a lot. I really like thorny characters. But if I were to play someone, I think I would go for the big one and do King Lear.
Nice.
Yeah, King Lear. Just be a messy bitch.
Am, who's your favorite?
I really loved Viola growing up. Like I loved Viola so much. So
Because you're trans.
Special.
That's
fair.
why.
Very fair.
Yeah.
So special place in my heart. I think in terms of who I'd want to play, I would love to play Romeo and like just like do my full like brooding romantic boy for Romeo. Just pull it all out for that role.
That's awesome. I would love to see that happen. So I have my either or questions. Quick fire. Don't think about it too much. Lion King or West Side Story? I said
I don't even know the context,
too much.
But I'm going to say Lion King. Lion King.
Oh gosh, I shouldn't admit what I'm going to admit, but I have a feeling it would be Lion King anyway. But I have seen The Lion King. I have not seen West Side Story.
That's fair.
You're fine.
You're fine.
You're fine. You don't run. You're fine. I think this is a safe space to be like, you're fine.
It is a safe space. You're fine.
Oh, you know what? Real quickly, I'm so mad because it debuted. I want to say it debuted a day or two before the lockdown here in New York, but they had that version of West Side Story that was all brown kids here in New York, all under 18, all brown kid. And I was like, I wanted to see it so bad, and then it closed I don't even know if they got a single performance in, but I wanted to see that so bad because that context makes the whole story different, completely different. And I was like, I hope that comes back.
I hope so too. 10 Things I Hate About You or She's the Man?
10 Things I Hate About You. 10 Things I Hate About You. Yeah.
Fair.
I'm gonna have to say both because 10 Things I Hate About You, but also in early transition, my husband, who's a trans boy, looked exactly like Amanda Bynes in drag. Slightly darker color.
I love that so
very,
much.
very similar. Like,
oh, that's very sweet. The last one I have is because we're running out of time, a Fuck, Marry, Kill. Ooh. Oh, this is the YA panel, Shag, Marry, Kill, maybe. So Romeo, Sebastian, and Benedict are my three. Romeo and Juliet, Sebastian from Twelfth Night, Benedict is Much Ado About Nothing. And I'm going to make you go first.
Wait, who's going first?
Either one of you if you have strong feelings, but I was going to push you a little bit.
Okay.
I actually have to write it down because I keep getting them mixed up.
I love them all. I do play this game sometimes, I promise. And I actually play it right. I can't. I will love them all.
That's fair. They're all very lovable. Mark, do you have feelings? Push someone off a cliff.
Okay. No. I got it. Because I kept getting it mixed up in my head. All right.
Yeah.
I have a stack of index cards here for plotting, so I was just like, let me use one of them. All right, I would. We'll do shag, marry, kill. Shag Benedict, marry Sebastian, and kill Romeo.
Fair. Good choice.
For the drama.
All right. So we have a question that popped up in the chat. This is just a request. Please let us know about the classic remix books. Do you know when those are dropping or when that starts?
I think we have the first two on September 7th of this year. I think they're both coming out the same day. We have Bethany Morrow's Little Women, which is, I believe, called So Many Beginnings. Mm-hmm. And we have C.B. Lee's Treasure Island, which I believe is called A Clash of Steel. Their covers are gorgeous. Go see them. They both sound incredible. I cannot wait.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Well, we're at on East Coast time. We're at 9:58. So I will wrap it up here. I want to thank you both so much again for your vulnerability, for sharing, for your beautiful brains and your beautiful stories. I do appreciate being here with you, and thank you all for watching at home. This has been lovely. Thank you so much. And please purchase That Way Madness Lies. I did it upside down just like you. The purchase button is down below. And support BookSoup. And thank you so much, everyone. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. All.
Thank you.
So much
I didn't
fun.
get a chance to stay up, but I said it earlier when we were not on camera. But all of you who are watching, I used to live on Clark and Sunset in West Hollywood. So I was 2 blocks away from BookSoup. There was a period in my life where I would walk to Tower Records and then walk across the street to BookSoup. So it has been very surreal and lovely to finally get to do an event with this bookstore I used to go to all the time. So thank you very much for hosting us. Thank you so much. And thank you for moderating, Christina.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina, for moderating. Thank you, Anna Marie. Thank you, Mark. This was such a wonderful event, and I am sorry that it wasn't in person because that would have been so special to have you all in the store, especially since it used to be your stomping grounds. Also, I don't know why when you said She's the Man, She's All That popped in my head. So I was like, well, of course, 10 Things, but She's the Man. But She's the Man is a quotable classic. Love that one. That's such a great Shakespeare adaptation, even though 10 Things is my favorite. But thank you all for such a wonderful event. It was so amazing to hear all of your thoughts and stories and ideas. And congratulations on this book. And to Dahlia, since I see you here, it's so awesome. I'm going to gift this to so many people I know, and I'm really excited to read it. So thanks, everyone, for coming. And thank you all for being with us. And everyone have a wonderful rest of your night. Bye.
Thank you.